expanding.
If you leave on your own, you can take advantage of legal programs, come back.
The Department of Homeland Security offering to pay for one-way tickets back to migrants' home countries and the new plans to reopen a notorious prison. Nightmare at Newark.
We can't continue to rely on the FAA, which is a huge thing to say.
I'm just trying not to know what's wrong, so as to not get mad at anyone.
Air travel anxiety rising as ground stops, runway construction, equipment issues, and the persistent staffing shortages now creating ripple effects coast to coast.
You don't want people who are second-guessing their gut feelings. You want to be able to test for what those gut feelings are.
Jury selection for Sean Diddy Combs' criminal trial now underway. The shocking allegations potential jurors were pressed on as the months-long case begins. Plus, student loan default collection resumes. The options borrowers have now as mounting debt and penalties loom for millions. The National News Desk is America's News Now. Live from the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Good Monday evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Didi Gatton, and we begin with President Trump accelerating his mass immigration agenda. The administration unveiling 2 new measures targeting illegal immigrants. We have team coverage tonight. Kayla Gaskins details the president's plans to reopen the once notorious Alcatraz prison. But first, Ryan Smith at the Live Desk with a new incentive, Ryan, to get undocumented migrants to leave the country on their own.
Yeah, according to the White House today, undocumented migrants can receive up to $1,000 if they self-deport and then return to their home country voluntarily. It's the latest move in the president's sweeping mass deportation plans, the Department of Homeland Security even going as far to say that the agency will pay for travel assistance. Take a look at this here. Secretary Kristi Noem calling this the safest option for law enforcement and a 70% savings for U.S. taxpayers. In fact, DHS has said that it costs more than $17,000 to arrest, detain, and remove someone. Let's show you a live look tonight here over Chicago, where DHS officials say that one migrant already received his paid flight back to home to Honduras. The agency now says more tickets have been booked for this week as well as next. Also in the Windy City, Chicago, along with Philadelphia and a few others, canceling Cinco de Mayo parades today over heightened fears officials say that stem from the country's ongoing crackdown on illegal immigration.
The National News Desk, Kayla Gaskins, continues our coverage with President Trump's order to reopen one of America's harshest prisons 60 years after it closed.
President Donald Trump's latest solution for dealing with illegal migrants: to reopen Alcatraz.
And it's long been a symbol, Alcatraz, of whatever it is. I mean, it's a sad symbol, but it's a symbol of law and order.
The former maximum security federal prison off the coast of San Francisco held the worst of the worst offenders, like notorious gangster Al Capone. The prison closed in 1963. On Sunday, Trump directing the Bureau of Prisons, the FBI, and Homeland Security to start the rebuilding process, explaining to reporters the idea came as a response to judges blocking deportations without due process.
So many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single, think of it, every single person that's in our country illegally, that came in illegally. That would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous.
Some GOP lawmakers supportive of the idea.
So people understand we're a nation of laws again, unlike what we had underneath Biden. When we want to, start talking about criminals being punished, I don't believe in keeping them comfortable.
The president's Democratic critics are hammering him on the due process issue.
He's taking a page out of the book of the dictators and autocrats he admires.
But the fact-checking site Snopes pointing out that most of the deportations under former President Obama also didn't involve due process. Snopes says 3 million individuals were deported under Obama, as his critics dubbed him deporter-in-chief. And on average, 74% of those removals were expedited and didn't include legal hearings. And Alcatraz is currently a museum maintained by the National Park Service. Critics argue turning it back into an operating prison, or even Trump's proposal of building a bigger, better facility on the island, will be extremely expensive at a time when the government is focused on slashing spending.
On that point, Kayla, do we have any idea how much it would cost to rebuild Alcatraz?
Well, first there's the operating costs. Everything about this island is very expensive. Alcatraz was historically expensive to run because of its isolated location and reliance on boat trips for supplies. Everything, including water and gasoline, has to arrive on a barge. So the decision to shut down the prison in the 60s was because it was so costly, 3 more times more expensive than other federal prisons. Some estimates place the reopening costs of Alcatraz at anywhere from $235 million to $370 million up front, and then the annual operating costs at around $60 million. Now, today, Trump told reporters in the Oval Office he does have people looking into it. Didi.
Kayla Gaskins reporting tonight from the Capitol. Thank you.
And what we're trying to do is bring in some new messengers that are not only more equipped to fight in this moment against Donald Trump and build the Democratic Party into being a true opposition party. We're also trying to make sure that we're giving voters the best options that they can. It can't just be the party that is against Donald Trump.
And the DNC's David Hogg not backing down from his mission to weed out, quote, ineffective Democrats, despite growing fire from within his own party. Democrats growing increasingly divided on this issue as they work to nail down their winning strategy. But David Hogg isn't the only one who believes bold change is necessary to defeat the Trump agenda. Progressive former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke says the party needs to fight on every front.
I think our party, unfortunately, has gotten lazy and overly enamored of 7 so-called battleground or blue wall states to the detriment of Alabama and Mississippi and Texas and Louisiana. The battle line in the Democratic Party right now is not between moderates and progressives. It's between those who are going to fight and those who are going to surrender. And if you're not willing to fight, get out of the way.
Meanwhile, progressive star Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez faced a tough crowd at a town hall this weekend, getting interrupted by constituents in her own home district in New York City.
I want to know what you're doing about the genocide in Gaza. Good work, hey.
President Trump believes the Republican Party still has a big future, but he does not think Democrats have the same odds.
I think we have a tremendous group of people. We talked about a number of them. You look at Marco, you look at J.D. Vance, who's fantastic. You look at, I could name 10, 15, 20 people right now just sitting here. No, I think we have a tremendous party. And you know what I can't name? I can't name one Democrat. I mean, I look at the Democrats, they're in total disarray.
New details now in a blow to Republicans. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp will not run for the U.S. Senate. Kemp said despite encouragement from friends and some Senate GOP, it was the best decision for him and his family. However, Kemp says he will help make sure there is a strong Republican nominee to run for the Senate seat against Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff. Kemp's term as governor ends next year.
Now to the major mess out at Newark Liberty International Airport. FlightAware tracking hundreds and hundreds of delayed and canceled flights over the weekend, and that right there is not let up at all even tonight, sending ripple effects for air travel nationwide. United CEO Scott Kirby calling Newark's air traffic control facility, quote, chronically understaffed for years. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy just saying today the DOT will soon announce a plan this Thursday to transform air traffic control and remodel that outdated system.
They have the most critical job for our safety. And so if they are understaffed and the people that are covering are going to be overtired because they are doing longer shifts, as a flyer, that's making me feel very nervous, actually.
Yeah, so the ATC staffing chaos surfaced 1 week ago today. ABC News now reporting an outage at Newark caused air traffic control computer screens to go dark for roughly 60 to 90 seconds. As of tonight, 5 of those controllers are now on a medical leave, calling the experience a traumatic event.
New developments. The Army is pausing helicopter flights near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. It comes after 2 commercial planes had to abort landings last week to keep them away from a Black Hawk helicopter flying to the Pentagon. In January, a Black Hawk helicopter from the same unit collided with a passenger jet near the airport, killing 67 people. The app now former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz used to archive signal chats is suspending operations after it was hacked. A telemessage spokesperson told CNBC it's temporarily taking services offline. The cyber attack was first reported by 404 Media. Waltz was photographed with telemessage on his phone during a cabinet meeting last week, shortly before he was reassigned. It's another issue for the UN ambassador nominee, who could face a rough confirmation process.
It will be a brutal hearing. He's not qualified for the job just by nature of the fact that he participated in the signal chain.
This administration, we're cracking down on terrorists. We're securing our border. We're putting lethality in our military first. If Mike's leaving, that's the president's decision, and we support that.
The chats Waltz and the other Trump officials shared on Signal were not reportedly taken. This comes as the Wall Street Journal says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth used Signal more often for Pentagon business than previously disclosed. The Journal reports Hegseth has engaged in at least a dozen separate chats. Ivy League schools are under intense scrutiny tonight. The Trump administration announced on Friday it plans to revoke Harvard University's tax-exempt status, citing concerns over the university's policies. Meantime, congressional Republicans are demanding transparency, pressing Ivy League schools to release detailed information on how they set tuition prices. Joining us now to pick up the discussion, Janae Bowens from the Fact Check team. So let's start there. How exactly do colleges decide what to charge students?
Yeah, Diddy. So according to the New York Times, many schools hire firms, some owned by private equity companies, to analyze enrollment data and calculate financial aid offers. Now, these consultants help colleges pinpoint the minimum amount of scholarship money they need to offer to get a student to say yes without giving away too much.
And they use some pretty advanced tools to do that, right? Walk us through that process.
Right. So these firms use complex algorithms and predictive models to analyze a student's profile. That includes test scores, family income, and even how fast they open emails. Now, all of that feeds into a system that spits out a tailored financial aid offer.
Oh, that's so interesting, especially that email part. It sounds like a multi-tiered structure. Janae, thank you. Janae's going to be back in a few minutes to break down which colleges are currently the most expensive in the country.
A bottle service sign goes viral for the worst of reasons over the weekend. Next, the outrage surrounding its anti-Semitic messaging and how the bar's famous owner is now responding.
Plus, Diddy turned down a plea deal in his sex trafficking case, so jury selection is now underway. Next, a timeline for what promises to be one of the most watched trials in recent history.
And as we take a quick break, first, a live look over Austin, Texas from our station KI, part of our network of 4,000 local journalists. The Texas Senate is now looking to get rid of the state's lottery after allegations of criminal acts. Senate Bill 1988 would completely abolish the lottery. That includes Mega Millions, Scratch Off, and Powerball. If passed, Texas would be the 6th state without a lottery. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Temple University now suspending a student for his alleged role in parading around an anti-Semitic sign here at this popular sports bar in Philadelphia. The bar's famous owner had hoped to turn the message of vile hate speech into a teachable moment. Listen.
The thought was maybe if they could learn more about, the history and why this is so offensive and visit Poland and the concentration camps in Auschwitz, you could make a teaching moment out of it. So that's what we landed on.
Sounded like a positive idea there. Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy, who you see there, he is Jewish. He is now revoking that offer to send one of the men allegedly involved to Poland. The student suspended, identified by Portnoy and several others online today as Mo Khan, uploaded the video himself, but he's now denying he had anything to do with the sign that read F, quote, the Jews, even though reportedly he came clean last night on this and profusely apologized. Now, Barstool says several bar employees involved with that sign were immediately fired over the weekend.
The federal sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs began today in New York City. Dozens of potential jurors were questioned about their answers on a questionnaire meant to help determine if they can be fair and impartial. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, joining us. That's a key question on many people's minds, Jeff. We know that this trial will feature violent and sexually explicit videos. Tell us how many jurors will be chosen and also what questions were they asked.
In total here, Didi, 12 jurors and 6 alternates will be chosen for this trial. The questions ranging from views on law enforcement to feelings on having multiple partners. Now, the judge did describe the charges Combs is facing to the potential jurors, telling them that he pleaded not guilty and is presumed innocent. United States versus Combs, now officially underway in New York City. The music mogul facing 5 criminal counts, including sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, transportation for purposes of prostitution, and racketeering conspiracy.
And there could be some abuse charges related to violence that was committed on top of that, added on to make a total of 5 charges.
On Monday, dozens of potential jurors facing a series of questions, including knowledge of the case, experience with sexual assault or domestic violence, views on law enforcement along with hip-hop artists, and feelings on having multiple partners.
You need to look for open-minded people and people whose discernment you're trusting. You want them to be able to listen to what the lawyers are saying and what the witnesses are saying and make their own decision using their discernment.
A jury consultant herself, Somerville says in high-profile cases, it's important the prosecution and defense ask potential jurors 2 questions.
Have they prejudged the facts and evidence of the case, or 2, whether it's swayed them one way or the other.
Adding, the ideal juror is someone who responds appropriately to those questions and sticks to their guts.
You don't want people who are second-guessing their gut feelings. You want to be able to test for what those gut feelings are.
Now, prosecutors say the racketeering conspiracy charge involves allegations that Combs sex trafficked 3 victims and forced a 4th into sexual activity. Combs' lawyers say he's innocent and any group sex was consensual. 4 accusers are expected to testify. Reporting for the National News Desk, I'm Jeff Harris.
The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Seattle, where recent government cuts now pose a risk to the state's conservation groups.
Before you can enjoy a hike, often AmeriCorps crews like these on Tiger Mountain put in the work to make it possible.
We have been working on the Seattle View Trail, that's like up the mountain more, clearing out some pretty severe downfall.
Officials in charge of state land say that kind of work is now in jeopardy after the federal government announced it's terminating grants that pay for the AmeriCorps program.
Washington State Department of Natural Resources uses AmeriCorps funding to fund the Washington Conservation Corps, which helps us maintain our trails and keep recreation accessible and do all kinds of work on our public lands.
Across the country, we're told AmeriCorps grants support more than 1,000 public service programs, putting more than 30,000 people to work. The Trump administration says the sky-high federal deficit means programs like AmeriCorps are luxuries taxpayers cannot afford. What happens next could end up in court.
So thankful to the Attorney General and the Governor for joining many other states in fighting back against this termination that came out of the blue.
And in Little Rock, Arkansas, Superintendent Stephanie Niehaus is now on administrative leave following her husband's parole violation. Her husband, Zachary, was arrested after a sex offender compliance check at their home. He was on parole for a 2016 conviction on 10 counts of distributing, possessing, or viewing child pornography. Assistant Superintendent Becky Rosberg will take over until June, and former superintendent of the high school will be the new superintendent for the next school year.
Drug makers warn Trump-imposed tariffs will drive up prices and could limit access for American patients. What the White House is now doing to ramp up domestic drug manufacturing in the next 90 seconds. A major concern at the forefront of President Trump's ongoing tariff policies are the potential impacts on Americans' access to pharmaceutical drugs. Some now predicting supply chains will slow down, driving up those prices right here in the U.S. Well, today, President Trump signing an executive order aimed at boosting domestic drug manufacturing. It instructs the FDA to ramp up inspections for any potential new production sites and speed up the process for pharmaceutical companies to build up their own manufacturing here in the U.S. Drug makers Eli Lilly and Johnson & Johnson have already announced new domestic manufacturing investments. Trump said today he has plans to announce pharmaceutical-specific tariffs within the next 2 weeks. Now, the U.S. imported more than $200 billion in pharmaceutical products back in 2023, the majority of those coming from Ireland, Germany, and Switzerland.
A Virginia public school has opened a Title IX investigation into 3 high school boys who, according to a parent, were uncomfortable with a biological girl using the boys' locker room. A dad says a female student who identifies as male has been using the boys' locker room for some time now. In March, after gym class, the biological female student used a phone to record his son and his friends. So according to Loudoun County Public Schools' own policy, video and audio recordings are prohibited in school locker rooms. Now his son, not the student that shot the video, is facing serious consequences because of that recording, including whether or not he committed sexual harassment.
Yeah, I don't think my son should be punished for expressing his First Amendment right and being able to ask questions. They're young, they're 15 years old, they're expressing their opinions, and now they're being targeted for expressing those opinions.
He believes the district should reverse the policy that allows students to use bathrooms and locker rooms based on their chosen gender identity. Loudoun County is one of 5 Northern Virginia school districts being investigated by the Department of Education for possible Title IX violations because of similar policies.
A fishing boat believed to have been carrying migrants capsizing, killing 3 who were on board. In the next 90 seconds, the active search underway right now to find 9 more still missing in what officials are describing as an incredibly risky attempt to enter the country illegally. Now to the active search for 9 people, likely migrants, we are told, unaccounted for after this small fishing boat capsized and washed ashore in Del Mar, north of San Diego, California. 3 people here died, and the U.S. Coast Guard saying today 4 were rescued and needed immediate medical help. The boat flipped out about 35 miles north of the Mexico border, and officials believe the boat was carrying migrants at the time, but it is not clear where exactly the boat was coming from. Migrants are increasingly turning to more riskier travel by sea to avoid those heavily guarded land borders. Panga boats, like this one you see here, leave the Mexican coast in the dead of night, heading north to the U.S.
Coming up next here on the National News Desk, a multi-day flood threat for millions just getting going. The urgent warning from the plains through the Gulf. And later, the Karen Reed retrial, day 9. The key witness testimony and the bizarre tools used to collect extremely delicate evidence.
Plus, a Houthi missile strike halts flights at Israel's main international airport. Hear from a witness who watched the attack happen from his seat on the runway.
You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
We're operating at a fiscal deficit now that is unsustainable.
The Oracle of Omaha speaking out, his outlook on the economy as DOGE continues to cut down the federal workforce.
There's some advantages, I guess, and I'm not looking to hurt the industry. I want to help the industry.
Hollywood now a Trump tariff target. The president's new push to evolve the film industry into a cash machine for America. And student loan collections resume after a pandemic pause. The warnings from experts to ensure your credit score isn't impacted. Live from the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Good evening, I'm Didi Gatton, and as we come on the air this half hour, tens of millions of Americans are under severe thunderstorm threats and many more at risk of life-threatening floods. Let's get straight over to the live desk. And Ryan, which states will be hit the hardest?
Yeah, Didi, the most impacted states we are tracking for you at home tonight will be across the southern plains as well as the Gulf Coast. Millions right now are expected to be in the path of potentially deadly flash flooding out there. Now to East Texas tonight, people there are preparing for hail, damaging wind gusts, even some tornadoes as thunderstorms develop into the overnight hours and tomorrow morning. NOAA's weather predictor has parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana at a level 3 out of 4 risk of flash flooding, with some of those areas now expected to receive between 5 all the way up to 8 inches of rain. Really a 1-2 punch for some out there. Security cameras capturing this dramatic, scary moment here. A volunteer firefighter station. This is out of Jackson County, Alabama, severely damaged by the storms there that roared through that area over the weekend. Now to the East Coast tonight, where the nation's capital and surrounding region outside Washington, D.C., already seeing some hail and damaging storms that are really expected to continue throughout tonight. More wet weather is expected tomorrow, with a possible break from all that rain coming not tomorrow, but not until Wednesday.
A Houthi missile strike briefly halted flights at Israel's main international airport. The attack happening just hours before top Israeli cabinet ministers were set to vote on whether to intensify the country's military operations in the Gaza Strip. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris, joining us now to discuss. You spoke with a man tonight who saw that strike happen. What does he have to say about this attack?
The word he kept using is surreal, Diddy. His name is Noam Elia. He had just landed in Tel Aviv Sunday after taking a flight from JFK in New York, where he works. Now, he says shortly after landing, the strike made impact, followed by a massive plume of smoke. The Houthi rebels have been striking Israel throughout the war in Gaza in solidarity with Palestinians. The attack on Ben Gurion International Airport coming just hours before top Israeli cabinet ministers were set to vote on whether to intensify military operations in the Gaza Strip. The missile launch setting off air sirens, with the projectile landing in a field near an access road leading right to airport parking lots.
My curtain was open to my right, and boom, I saw it, falling from the sky. And once it touched the ground, I could see like fire and heavy black smoke. It was surreal.
A spokesperson for the Houthi military said in a video statement that the group fired a hypersonic ballistic missile at the airport. Israel's paramedic service confirming 4 people were lightly wounded. Now, in response to the attack, the Israeli military confirms it struck dozens of Houthi targets in Yemen earlier today. The IDF saying 20 of its fighter jets took part in that mission. At least 1 person was killed.
Developing now, the Trump administration announced tonight Harvard University will not receive new federal research grants until it meets White House's demands. A letter sent to Harvard's president relayed the university is not eligible for grants from the federal government until it demonstrates responsible management, they say, of the university. The administration's claims include what they describe as the university's failures on anti-Semitism and its ongoing discrimination on its campus. This decision will not impact federal Pell Grants or student loan funding.
Well, it was a rude awakening for millions of student loan borrowers today. The Department of Education now resuming its collection of payments, ending that almost 5-year pause implemented by President Biden. TransUnion now finding about 4 million borrowers are 90 days or more past due. That's considered seriously delinquent. That's about 1/5 of all borrowers right now, which is a sharp jump up from 2020, when only about 11% of borrowers were considered seriously delinquent. The Education Department now threatening to cut off federal funding to colleges and universities with high levels of students in default right now. Falling behind on student loan debt can be costly, both in the short and long term. Delinquencies can wipe out up to 171 points on your credit score. And the federal government can then garnish wages, withhold tax refunds, even Social Security benefits.
Warren Buffett has influenced generations of people to try to build wealth for decades and is hailed as a true pioneer when it comes to investing. He's now weighing in on the country's spending problem as he announced this past weekend that he is stepping down as CEO at Berkshire Hathaway. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports.
Warren Buffett, arguably the world's most successful investor, used his strategy of value investing to make Berkshire Hathaway a $1.1 trillion conglomerate. He says the country can't keep going on its current fiscal path.
We're operating at a fiscal deficit now that is unsustainable over a very long period of time.
Buffett weighed in on the Department of Government Efficiency during Berkshire Hathaway's annual shareholder meeting. Doge's work has been controversial and tough to quantify, leading to reductions in the federal workforce and the number of agencies in government, while hitting legal roadblocks because of how abrupt the action has been. The Oracle of Omaha says the work is likely necessary.
I think that it's a job I don't want, but it's a job I think should be done. And Congress does not seem good at doing it.
Doge claims to have saved taxpayers $165 billion so far. Congress now has a tricky path to enacting those cuts and much more into the next budget. Some House members are looking to reduce at least $1.5 trillion in spending to pay for tax cut extensions and other programs. Lawmakers will haggle over the final numbers. Meanwhile, government spending watchdog John Hart, CEO of Open the Books, told Full Measure correspondent Scott Thuman that business as usual throughout government agencies won't work long term.
Because of the way the budget rules work, if they don't empty their account, their coffers, they're worried they're going to get their spending cut. So what we see this perverse kind of like throwing money out at things like lobster tail at the Pentagon, $20 million, ribeye steaks, $200 million on furniture just at the Pentagon.
Nearly 15 years ago, Buffett proposed the solution to the country's deficit problem, saying anytime the country's deficit is more than 3% of the GDP, sitting members of Congress would be ineligible for re-election. Obviously, that never happened, but the point was that if the stakes were higher for members of Congress, they'd figure out how to spend money better. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
One of Pope Francis's iconic Pope mobiles will now be transformed into a mobile healthcare unit for children in Gaza. The Vatican says it's one of the Pope's final wishes. It's now being outfitted with medical equipment for diagnosis, examination, and treatment of children in the war-torn enclave. It'll be sent to Gaza once safe access is secured. There's a short list circulating for potential candidates for the next Pope, including one from the Republic of Congo, the Philippines, and Switzerland. 80% of the cardinal electors who will have the task of choosing a new pope starting Wednesday were named by Pope Francis. Earlier today, President Trump addressing recent memes depicting Trump as the next pope.
The Catholics loved it. I had nothing to do with it. Somebody made up a picture of me dressed like the Pope, and they put it out on the internet. That's not me that did it. I have no idea where it came from.
The process to find a successor typically takes church officials 2 or 3 weeks. The conclave begins on Wednesday.
Breaking news tonight, pro-Palestinian students at the University of Washington have taken over and are right now occupying an engineering building right there on campus tonight. It's all in protest against the university's ties and receiving donations from Boeing. Now, so far, they are refusing to leave that building entirely, they say, until several specific demands are met. No response so far yet from university officials. Now, we have a news crew on the way to that scene. We will, of course, report back as soon as we learn any new details.
Maker crushed and carried downstream.
Choose America's News now, each weekday evening from the National News Desk.
Here at the live desk tonight, we show you this live look here over Seattle, Washington, where an urgent manhunt underway at this hour tonight for an inmate who escaped custody at SeaTac International Airport. Wild one here. Authorities say this man here, 28-year-old Cedric Stevenson, was being transported to Bowling Green, Kentucky to be booked on several unspecified outstanding warrants. But get this, during the check-in process for that flight, Stevenson managed to flee his security detail, then hop on a light rail train headed into the city of Seattle. Now let's take you out to Dallas, Texas tonight, where state police there looking for capital murder suspect Trevor McEwen after he removed his ankle monitor and skipped his court date today. McEwen has admitted to shooting and killing his neighbor in 2023. As of tonight, there is a $10,000 reward for information that leads to his arrest.
Many colleges now hire private consultants to help shape financial aid offers. These firms use algorithms that analyze test scores, family income, even how quickly a student opens emails, all to determine the minimum amount of aid needed to seal the deal. According to the New York Times, the fact-check team's Janae Bowens is back to discuss. So, impact. What does this mean for students and their families?
Yeah, Diddy. So aid offers are now highly personalized. Students might see different packages based on their profile or even how fast they reply to recruitment emails. The result, uneven offers, more pressure to respond quickly, and for families, a lot more guesswork on what college will actually cost.
All right, maybe you're looking at college, have a child in college. Which ones charge the most?
Yeah, so according to the College Investor, the top 5 most expensive colleges this year are Vassar College, USC, Colgate University, Amherst College, and Colorado College. Their sticker prices topped $73,000 a year.
Wow. College Board data shows, Janae, a steady rise in tuition since the 90s. What's driving all of that?
Yeah, so a key factor is the 2008 recession. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, many states cut funding to public colleges after the downturn. To fill the gap, schools raised tuition, and between 2008 and 2018, public colleges hiked tuition by nearly 40%.
Ouch. All right, Janae, thank you. For more on this fact-check team topic, including links to their sources, scan that QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Next up, new bombshell developments out of the Karen Reed retrial today. The key witnesses backing the defense into a bit of a corner. And the unusual, bizarre items used at the crime scene now putting some key evidence in question. Day 9 of Karen Reed's high-stakes retrial out of Massachusetts. She's accused of running over, killing her Boston cop boyfriend. Now retired Canton Police Lieutenant Paul Gallagher was on the stand today. The defense grilling him about the unconventional methods used to collect evidence at the scene. Gallagher using a leaf blower and red Solo cups from a nearby officer's home to collect blood found at the scene. It was then transported to the department in paper grocery bags. Gallagher said if they really hadn't resorted to those methods, they might have lost some key evidence in the harsh winter conditions. The jury also hearing testimony from a paramedic who responded to the scene that night. She claimed Reed admitted to hitting John O'Keefe with her SUV. Testimony now expected to continue through the rest of this week.
Ravens released kicker Justin Tucker after 13 seasons. The Ravens call it a football decision. Tucker is under investigation by the NFL over accusations of improper sexual conduct with 16 massage therapists in the Baltimore area in spas. He strongly denies any wrongdoing but has apologized. Baltimore drafted a kicker in last month's draft. Tucker is an 8-time All-Pro and believed to be one of the best kickers in the NFL history. Now to hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex trafficking trial. Jury selection began today in New York City and could last several days. Joining us to discuss is attorney and legal analyst Jana Spilborn. It's great to see you again, Jana. So first of all, how likely is it that teams will be able to find an unbiased jury that's never heard of Diddy?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Although I'll tell you, the last person you want on the jury is someone who's never heard of him, right? Because if they haven't heard of P. Diddy, what rock have they been living under? But what you do want is to find people who don't have a preconceived bias against these very salacious issues. Look, there's sex trafficking. There are sex crimes alleged here. You could easily have people in the jury, potential jury pool, who have very strong opinions about that. People who perhaps supported the Me Too movement, for example. You will never get a jury that doesn't include women, and women are the victims in this case.
Many have seen, Jana, the surveillance video of Diddy and his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, that clearly speaks for itself. We do want to show some of it now, but we do want to warn some viewers may find it disturbing. As you know, Jana, he did apologize after this video came out. I'm wondering how significant A, issuing that apology is, and B, how significant this piece of evidence will be, do you think?
This piece of evidence, to me, is the most damaging for the defense. And it's interesting because he's not charged in this case with beating up his girlfriend. I wish he had been back then when it happened, but that statute of limitations has run. Here's why it's going to hurt him the most. Diddy's defense is basically that all of these freak-offs, all of these things, the allegations against him, were done consensually. But when you look at this video with Cassie Ventura trying to get away from this man and him running out in a towel and beating her up in a public hotel hallway, there's nothing consensual about that.
As you mentioned, I believe obviously the defense will try to go after this as from a consent standpoint, but how challenging is it going to be for prosecutors to prove that Diddy was running a racketeering enterprise?
Yeah, now here's where the defense might actually make some points. It's odd to charge this sort of behavior under RICO, right? Because think about it. If they're alleging that he was running a criminal enterprise, number one, there's nobody else at the defense table. They didn't charge any of his assistants or what have you, employees, with being part of this racketeering enterprise.
We appreciate your expertise. As always, important to stress, Diddy has pleaded not guilty to all of these charges. Jana Spilborn, thank you for joining us. We'll be in touch. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Now to the survey that'll make any germaphobe cringe a bit. Today, get this, is World Hygiene Day, and a shocking number of Americans reportedly don't know how or when to properly wash their hands. Can't make this stuff up. A new health survey finding that nearly half of the 3,000 plus respondents either forget or choose not to wash intentionally their hands at key times, such as after visiting a restaurant, grocery store, or doctor's office. And get this, only about 6 in 10, 62% correctly answered that the proper way to wash your hands is with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. That's the key number. Experts say washing your hands after a cough or sneeze, or using the restroom, and handling all food will dramatically reduce the spread of respiratory or other dangerous diseases. So it begs the question, Didi, you know, I myself, bit of a germaphobe. Some classify me as having OCD with this. I always like to say my ABCs. Then I know I am good to go.
You know, the results of the survey are really interesting, and I also find it interesting that there is a specific technique to do this. I think that it helps that we have sanitizer everywhere you look nowadays.
The more you know.
Yep, exactly. Google now reporting a massive spike in phishing scams targeting its 8 billion Gmail users. The tech giant stressing if you do fall for one, you have 7 days to act. The company says users need a recovery phone number or email for their accounts, allowing them to verify their identity. Recently, Google confirmed a phishing attack targeting all Gmail users that appear to be from the company. And Americans may find their Social Security ID online with secure access. The Social Security Administration hopes it will provide an alternative to the traditional cards. The agency says the cards will only be for the purpose of non-Social Security matters. Right now, lost or stolen cards can only be replaced online or in person. And a live look at Washington, D.C., where the NFL draft is set to take place in 2027. President Trump says the popular event will be held on the National Mall. Is more good news, of course, for the district, which also just agreed to a deal to bring the Washington Commanders back to the city with a brand new football stadium at its former RFK site. NFL officials expect more than 1 million people to attend the 3-day event. Ahead in our next hour, guaranteed dollars for self-deportations, the new plan from the White House. Plus, the major airline now encouraging passengers to avoid Newark. The operations meltdown that likely won't be fixed anytime soon.
And coming up later, the trial against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs officially underway. The questions potential jurors are now being asked and how many will be chosen.
Those stories and much more coming up. But first, here's a look at America's news and weather now where you live.